A Moments Between documentary. Most people think the Cold War was fought with missiles, spies, and proxy wars, with nuclear standoffs, espionage networks, and ideological speeches that divided the world into hostile camps. And while all of that is true, it hides a quieter battlefield, one that decided outcomes without firing a single shot. That battlefield was the market. In 1972, the Soviet Union inflicted one of the most effective strategic blows of the Cold War against the United States. Not with tanks, not with submarines, but with contracts. And the consequences rippled through global food supplies, inflation rates, and political power for years. This moment is known as the Great Grain Robbery. And it wasn't an accident, it was a lesson in leverage. This is Moments Between, where the stories you think you know are never quite what they seem. To understand how this happened, you have to understand the strange economic moment the world found itself in at the beginning of the 1970s. The post-World War II order was cracking. The Bretton Woods system had collapsed. The US dollar had been detached from gold. Inflation was rising across the developed world. Governments were spending heavily, and confidence in monetary stability was eroding. At the same time, food had quietly become one of the most strategic resources on Earth. The Soviet Union had a problem it could not solve internally. Its agricultural system was inefficient, rigid, and vulnerable to weather. Poor harvests were common, and in the early 1970s, Soviet grain production collapsed. Bread shortages were not just an inconvenience in a communist state, they were a political threat. Hunger destabilizes regimes faster than ideology ever can. The Soviets needed grain, and they needed it fast. The United States, meanwhile, had just experienced one of the largest wheat harvests in its history. American farmers produced massive surpluses, driving prices down. To protect domestic agriculture, the U.S. government subsidized grain sales and encouraged exports. What Washington did not do was monitor food exports as a strategic asset. Grain was treated as commerce, not power. That blind spot was everything. Soviet officials realized they didn't need to negotiate government to government. They didn't need public agreements that would raise alarms. Instead, they sent buyers quietly into American grain markets. Multiple trading companies, multiple contracts, no single purchase large enough to trigger concern. Individually, each deal looked normal. Collectively, they were catastrophic. The Soviets bought millions of tons of wheat and corn at subsidized prices, locking in supply before the US government understood what was happening. Because of export guarantees, American taxpayers effectively underwrote the deals. The Soviet Union wasn't just buying food, it was buying it at a discount. By the time US officials realized the scale of the purchases, the grain was already committed. Ships were loaded, contracts were signed. The leverage was gone. What followed was predictable and devastating. Domestic grain supplies tightened, prices surged, food costs rippled through the economy, driving inflation higher at exactly the wrong moment. Meat, bread, and dairy prices climbed. Political pressure exploded. Farmers benefited briefly, consumers did not. And Washington was forced to explain how its Cold War rival had managed to outmaneuver it using nothing more than market access. There was no theft in the traditional sense, no laws were broken, no secrets stolen. That's what made it so effective. The Great Grain Robbery exposed a fundamental truth: markets can be weaponized. Control supply, manipulate timing, exploit policy blind spots, and you can achieve strategic outcomes without confrontation. The Soviets didn't challenge American military power, they exploited American economic assumptions. Food, once seen as neutral, was revealed as geopolitical infrastructure. The aftermath reshaped policy. The US began monitoring agricultural exports. Grain reserves were reevaluated. Trade reporting requirements tightened. But the lesson had already been delivered. Quietly, irreversibly. Power had shifted, not because the Soviet Union was stronger, but because it was more attentive to leverage. And this pattern didn't end in 1972. Food has since been used repeatedly as a strategic tool. Sanctions, export bans, supply disruptions, price manipulation. The logic remains the same. When a resource is essential to survival, control over its flow becomes power. The Great Grain Robbery wasn't a Cold War curiosity, it was a prototype. It demonstrated that in a globalized world, the most decisive battles are often invisible. They don't happen on borders, they happen in contracts, logistics, and policy gaps. And by the time the consequences are visible, the outcome is already locked in. This is why history doesn't change only through wars. It changes through decisions that feel technical, boring, and safe, until they aren't. The Soviet Union didn't defeat the United States in 1972, but it taught it something far more important. If you control the market, you don't need an army. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and here, on Moments Between, I'll show you where to look.